Okay, here we go. So, so we're going to go through the practice and we're going to kind of do it workshop style. So the idea is that we're going to go through each set of props and we're going to learn the best ways to use them kind of as it relates to the physical anatomy, why we use them, where, and then kind of building off that knowledge, you should be able to figure out where to slide the props in wherever it makes sense. So we're going to start, so if you've got like a couple blankets or a towel, or if you have an actual bolster, we're going to start laying down on the back, and we're just going to go through a couple ways that you can support yourself laying down on your back for a couple different goals. And so if you have towels or blankets, you just kind of take them and stack them up until they're a little bit thick. And then we'll come long ways on the mat, and you get your bolster or bolster type thing under your thighs. And then you just lay yourself right down. And then kind of scoot your butt towards your bolster. And then let the legs stretch out long, and you want your bolster or your stack of blankets or towels to be right under the backs of the thighs. Letting the shoulders relax down the back. And just taking a few moments to settle into the breath. So this one is nice anytime we're laying down in our yoga practice. This one is also really nice if you're trying to be someone who is a back sleeper, which is super healthy for your spine and your joints to sleep on your back. And so what we get here with the backs of the legs propped up on a bolster is it releases some of the tension and the compression that we find in the low back when the legs are straight. So it allows the pelvis to relax, it allows the length of the spine to relax in a more neutral shape. And when the spine is relaxed and in its nice neutral shape, we should be able to take some really deep breaths, feeling any constriction easing in the upper body. Good. With an inhale, reach the arms out long overhead. Exhale, squeeze the belly, hug the knees up into the chest, and just give yourself a little rock side to side. And the low back should feel fairly good here since we were stretched out nice and long with the low back supported. And then you can just roll over to one side and press yourself up to seated. And then we're actually going to turn around so that now we've got the our butt right by the bolster, and the bolster's kind of in the top half of the mat. And now we're going to lay down over the bolster or blankets, and we're going to try and get the top edge of the bolster so it's just right in the middle of the shoulder blades. And then we'll let the head come down to the ground. And if you need to shift a little bit so that the bolster is in the mid back, you can do that. And then from here, legs can be bent or legs can be straight. Arms come to a cactus position. And if it feels like your head doesn't reach the ground because the bolster or the blanket pile is too high, then if you have a block or block-like something nearby, you could take that block and you can bring the block under the head, and you should still be getting some nice big opening for the upper back here. Again, opening the back in this way is really nice for assisting with really big, deep breaths. So go ahead and take those nice full breaths. Feeling the ribs expand, letting the shoulders be heavy. It's too much to have the arms in that cactus shape. You can bring them down a little lower so they're in more of a T shape. Good. Let's take 2 more big deep breaths. So this is another one. Anytime we're laying down on the back, if you're someone who's tight in the upper chest, pectoral region. When we lay down in our Shavasana shape, or when we lay down at the beginning, you could stick a little bolster or a little pile of blankets under your back and just start to open the chest in this way. It's also good if you're working on a computer all day. Inhale, reach the arms out nice and long overhead. For most people, the hands will hang in the air. If they come all the way down to the ground, that's cool. Step the feet to the floor if they're not there already. And then bring the hands toward the belly. And just go ahead and roll to one side. Hey, Genevieve. And press yourself up to seated. Good. So we'll just take one more little variation here, laying down on your back with your bolster type thing. So you'll get your bolster or your pile of blankets, and you're going to put it long ways down the length of the mat. So it's just the same direction that your spine will go. And if you're using a blanket, right, it doesn't need to be super thick. So you just roll it up, or a towel, you just roll it up into a nice tight roll. And then instead of the bolster, you could have the blanket right down where the length of the spine is, okay? And so then once you've got that set up, for some people, again, if you're really tight in the chest, it's gonna be a bit much to lay flat on this. You're gonna need a little more support for your head. So if you've got something extra, so another blanket, or again, you can use a block. So you put a blanket on top where your head's gonna go, or you could take a block and stick a block just under the very edge so that there's a little more support for the head. So you pick whichever one you like. And then again, you're gonna scoot your butt right up to the edge of your little bolster or blanket roll or towel roll. And you're just gonna lay yourself down over the bolster. You really wanna make sure that the neck feels supported here. Good, and then this one puts a bit more weight on the back of the hip. So if you have like a seam in the back of your pants, you might just kind of tug your pants so you're not resting on the seam, because that can actually get pretty uncomfortable on the hips here. And then again, to really encourage that opening, so we're opening up the front body here. To encourage that opening, you can take the arms out to a T shape, or you can bring the arms to a cactus shape. It's a little bit harder to get that cactus shape here. T shape is a little easier. And then the legs can be straight, but for me, what I really like in this shape is to bring the soles of the feet together and the knees wide. And then since we're talking about props here, if it feels like it's too much for your body to take this pose with the knees wide, feet together, you could take some blankets or towels and just stick them under the sides of the hips so the legs are a little bit supported, so there's not quite so much pressure on the inner groin here. And that would be another way to prop. And so particularly in these restorative poses, you want to really take the time to get yourself nice and cozy and then let yourself settle in. Good, settling into those nice deep breaths. With these restorative poses that we're doing here in the beginning, I like to think of these as the kind of sound bites for your yoga practice. Like if you weren't going to do a class, but you just wanted to do 5 minutes or 10 minutes of yoga every morning or every night before you go to bed, these supported poses are a really nice way to do that. You support the body, you get nice and comfy, and you just allow yourself to settle into the stillness, calming the mind, calming the nervous system. Good, couple more big deep breaths here. Good, slowly press the knees together, stepping the feet to the floor. And then from this one, you can just roll over to the fetal position on one side. So you're rolling off of your bolster or your blanket, and then just take a moment, feel your body in space. And then nice and slow, press up to seated. So while we're in these shapes, I'm just going to show you a different way to get into that same shape using a different prop. So instead of the bolster, you can get a bit more kind of intense experience of opening on the front of the body. If we set up here for our fish pose with the blocks. And so for this one, you're going to have one block that's on its kind of skinny height, mirroring the length of the spine down the middle of the mat. And this is going to be along the spine, and just like the top of the block will be right at the bra line. And then this block, for most people, you're going to want it either at the same height, wide ways on your mat, or even a little bit higher. And then you'll bring yourself down, and you'll kind of set this up nice and slow. You can tuck your hands under your back if you need to shift the block a little bit. I also think I said it wrong. The bottom edge of the block is at the bra strap, or the bottom of the shoulder blades. And then you really want to make sure this top block comfortably catches the head. We won't spend too long here since we already went over this one. And then with this, generally you get a bit more of a, not extreme, but a bit more of an intense version of the same pose we were just in. And so again, you could do that with the knees wide, with the knees knocking together, or with the legs out straight. And if it feels nice to have a little bit more openness on the front of the neck, you can do it with the block down just one height. Good, and then same thing for this one. So generally from this pose, you can kind of bend your knees, bring the hands to the back of the legs, and pull yourself up to seated. But since we've just been doing such a nice thing for the spine, it's a little bit better to roll to one side and bring yourself out of the pose in that way. So rolling over, taking a nice big deep breath and relaxing. Pressing yourself up to your seated position, and then moving the blocks off to the side. So this pose is our fish pose. And so you would do this pose anytime. You could do this in a resting pose, or you could do it when we were doing our fish pose. I'll just show you what that looks like so you know. If the fish pose doesn't work for you, you instead do a version with the blocks or with the bolster under the back. Okay? All right. So now we're slowly going to flip over to hands and knees and have your blocks nearby. You could put your blocks on either side of your mat, or your block-like things. And then you could have a bolster or your little pile of blankets nearby. Yeah? And then we're going to come into our child's pose, and we're just going to go over a couple different variations of a child's pose. So if you come into your kind of normal child's pose, whatever that looks like for you, if you find that your knees bother you, another option here for your child's pose is to take a blanket and to tuck it right up into the crease of the knees so that you're just getting a bit of expansion in that knee joint. That's one thing that can be helpful here. If you're very tight in your chest, you can bring your blocks or books or cans of tomato sauce under your hands, and you could let the hands, as they stretch out long, rest on the blocks, and this can help to open up the armpits and open up the chest. Just lifting the hands up a little bit. If your head does not touch the ground in your child's pose, generally it's best to bring something under your head. So depending on how high the head is, that could be a block under the forehead. Blocks are a little hard, particularly depending on what kind of block you have. It could be a folded up blanket or towel under your forehead. And the reason that we support the head is because we want the neck to be a nice, long, neutral line. And when the head's really hanging, then we're over lengthening the back of the neck. So we support the neck, the head, so that the neck is in its nice neutral position. Good. Just a couple more breaths in your child's pose. Show you one final variation. For this one, generally you need to inhale, come all the way up to hands and knees. And then if you're using blankets or towels, generally you'll need quite a tall stack. And you're gonna bring your stack so that it's just right in between the knees. You can also do this with like a regular old pillow. Regular old pillow works pretty well. If you've got a bolster, bolster's great here. And then you just lay yourself down over the bolster. And then again, you don't have to be quite so deep in the hips or in the knees here if you're supported with the bolster. And you can also get a really nice stretch in the neck this way. And if you were gonna do this one, you would maybe take 5 breaths with the head turned in one direction. And then you'd make sure that you also turn your head in the opposite direction. Good, and then nice and slow, you can come up to hands and knees. And you can slide your pillows, your blankets, your bolster off to the side. And we'll talk a little bit here about supporting under the hands. So blocks under the hands, again, cans of tomato sauce under the hands, books under the hands. So there's a couple of reasons that we bring something under the hands. So the first reason is that for many people to have the wrist in that really full flexion is painful because the wrist joint isn't really meant to do that. And so if you have blocks or something that you can kind of get your hands up on and you can wrap your fingers around the front of the blocks, it allows the wrist to be a little bit longer. And that can be a lot healthier for the wrist joint. Yeah, and you're also strengthening the hand more, so you're really gripping whatever you're holding on to. And then let's go ahead and take our cat and cow from here. So I gave you one reason. We'll get to the second reason in a moment. And sometimes you'll notice when you lift your body up a little bit, you bring the hands up, it just gives you a little more space to move. You don't feel so crowded in on yourself. Good. And so speaking of space to move, what the blocks allow is more space for our legs to move between the floor and our belly. And so from here, there's 2 options depending on how large your belly is or how large your breasts are or how flexible you are in the hips. With the hands up on blocks, you could even come up onto the blocks on their highest height if you've got blocks or whatever you've got, highest height you can get. And then you can swing your right leg, we'll start with, forward and step the foot outside the blocks. Additionally, when you're this high up on nice high blocks, you might be able to bring your knee into your chest and step in between the blocks, which might be something you wouldn't be normally able to do. So from here, we'll tuck the back toes and we'll come into our nice long lunge. So that right knee is stacked directly over the ankle. If you've got your hands on blocks, you're wrapping the hands around the front of the blocks to elongate the wrists. And then from here, for many of us, particularly if we're tight in the hips or the upper back or the legs, what the blocks allow for is for the spine to be really long. So I've talked about before how we want all of our poses to be building off of our tall standing pose, just like you're standing in line at the store. Head over shoulders, over hips, over heels. And so right now, from the left heel to the top of the head, our body is in the same shape it would be in if we were standing. Whereas if we're not on the block, sometimes we're kind of hunched forward over the leg. And we're trying to kind of de-hunch the body, really drawing the chest forward. Squeezing the belly up and in, keeping the spine long. Good, go ahead and set that back knee down. We'll switch sides. You can, oh, actually, no, let's pause here. So let's shift the hips back and straighten that front leg. And then if you've got your props that you can bring your hands up onto to bring the floor closer to the hands, then from here you can walk the hands back in line with your right knee. And then reach that right hip up and back. Reach the left heel down to the ground. And now again, we can maintain that nice long spine when we do this half Hanuman stretch, right? Because otherwise, if we're really tight in the leg, where the knee's gonna be bent and we're gonna be hunching to get down to the ground, or we're gonna have to bring the hands up off of the floor and we're not gonna be able to support with the hands. But the blocks make it so we can do it with just a little bit of support. Big full inhales, big full exhales. Good, you'll start to bend back into that front knee so the blocks can walk forward or whatever you have for blocks. And then again, because you've got a little more space, maybe you're able to just slide that right knee back in space. You can also do your downward facing dog shape on blocks. If you've got like tomato cans or books, you want to be mindful with this one. If you don't have your books all taped up, you can tear your books when you do it this way. So you might just bring your hands down to the ground here. But if you're going to use your blocks or block like something that you built, the heels of the hands come to the back of the blocks. And then you lift the hips up into the air for your normal downward dog shape. And then what you might find here is if you're really tight in the legs normally and you have to keep your knees bent to keep your spine straight, by lifting the hands up a little higher, it just gives a little more space for the legs to straighten. So this is a lot more stable if you do it with the blocks on their lowest height, if you have regular blocks. But you can also do it with blocks on their medium height, their middle height. And then you have just a little more space. And maybe you're seeing a theme here. We're always trying to lengthen the spine. So a lot of what we're doing with our blocks under the hands is lengthening the spine. Good, exhale, tap the knees down on the floor. Sit the hips back to the heels. You could put the blocks on their lowest height if you like that option and lower down into your child's pose, or you could put a block under your forehead. Another option is that you can have a block under your chest and under your forehead, which mimics that bolster option that we talked about earlier. Good, inhale. You'll come back up to hands and knees. And then you'll bring your blocks back under your hands. Take a round of cat and cow shape. Good, so you might notice here my blocks are a little irregularly shaped. If that's throwing you off, I'm sorry. Usually blocks are just rectangles. Mine are a little rounded on the top, just to give a little bit of an exaggerated ability to keep the wrist long. I broke my wrist a couple of years ago, and so this really helps me keep my wrists feeling happy. Good, now find that nice long spine. So the long spine is always what we're going for. And then the left leg will move this time. Either knee straight into the chest and the foot between the blocks, or the leg sweeps out and around, yeah? And you've got your leg outside your blocks. So whichever works best for your body. And then we'll tuck the back toes, lift that back knee up into the air. And then again, what we're trying to find is that nice long standing shape. So from the right heel up to the top of the head now, my body is just like I was standing. So the shoulders are rolling back slightly. The chest is slightly forward. Belly is gently engaged. Good, and there's that active gripping with the hands. And remember, you can always have that back knee on the ground here if it's more comfortable for your body to do a little bit more of a restorative version of this pose. And if you find that you have tender knees or you're generally practicing on a really hard surface, then go ahead and take your towel or your blanket And you're always welcome to just keep that on your mat under where the knees go, so you always have that little bit of extra padding for the knees. That can really do wonders to make the practice just feel a little sweeter in your body. Good, and then from here, we'll shift it back. So the hips are pressing back so that they stack over that right knee. And now the left leg is straightening. And now the blocks are back in line with the left knee. So if we're really open, right, what this pose would look like is that the hands are on the ground, the spine is long, the legs are straight. But for many of us, we can't get down that far because the legs are a little too tight, or the back is a little too tight. And so we just bring the ground up to us, and then we can get that relaxed version of the pose with the hands and the chest, you know, supported, instead of having to be hovering up here with the hands on the hips or the hands behind the back. Another option for the hands, if you tend to find that your wrists get cranky when you do a lot of yoga, so if you tend to find that your wrists get cranky when you do a lot of yoga, you should do something about it. We don't want the wrist to hurt. So another option when we're not putting all of our weight in our hands is to make a really strong fist with the thumb out, and then really press the thumb into the block or the floor. As long as you're not bearing all of your weight in your hands, that's an okay position. Good, again, that wrapping of the hands around the blocks can help. Good, with your exhale, you'll start to walk the hands forward with the blocks if you've got them. Bending into that left knee, tucking the right toes, and then go ahead and press into the hands. Get that left foot just a little bit behind the blocks so the hands are slightly in front of the blocks. And then step your right foot forward, coming to your flat back shape. And so if you have your blocks up on your highest height, if you're someone that usually has to bring the hands to the legs for your flat back position, maybe if you have blocks or blocks and a bolster even, you can bring yourself up nice and high and do that flat back shape with the hands under the shoulders, which is a lot more supportive feeling often. So from this pose, the idea is that we're lengthening the backs of the legs. We're lengthening the chest forward, squeezing the belly up and in. And so again, we've got that neutral position of the spine, and this is just our standing pose folded to a 90-degree angle. Good, and then you can bend the knees softly, let the head hang heavy. And then depending on how far your body drapes forward, you could rest your elbows on your blocks. That can be a nice option for a little more support. You can build yourself a little tower that's the right height. Sometimes it can feel nice to rest your head on some blocks here, again, allowing you to release a little bit of tension in the neck or the shoulders that it might be hard to release otherwise. You might not be able to get down that far, and that's perfectly okay. Good, as you exhale, softly bend the knees. You can bring your hands to the blocks or to the legs, and that helps you to find that flat back, strong belly. And then shift the weight back into the heels and press yourself up to stand. Good, roll the shoulders down the back. Stretch through the fingertips. Good, and take a nice big full inhale, big full exhale. Good, now we're gonna use our blocks and our strap. We'll use the block first. So you're gonna take your block, or if you have like a squishy ball, you could use a squishy ball as well, even like a basketball or soccer works for this. Soccer ball, or you can use a pillow or a blanket or a towel that's folded up real tightly. I think I have a towel that I could show you that's folded up real tight. Oh, but I can't find it. Well, anyway, so using your block or whatever you've got, you're going to straighten your arms and you're going to press your hands into your block. And then rolling the shoulders down and back, you're going to start to lift the hands, keeping that nice strong press of the hands into whatever you've got there. And then you'll only go as high as you can. So usually I can lift my arms over my head, but when I'm pressing the block, it's a lot harder for me to get up that high, and that's okay. I don't have to get all the way up there. And we want to feel that activation in the arms. What does it feel like when we're pressing in on the block? One of the things that we're striving to do in our yoga practice is that when we move the body like this, like when the block isn't here, we want to be able to get that same engagement in the arms. We're always trying to consciously, actively engage the muscles. Good, let that block come down. And then go ahead, whatever you've got, stick it in between your thighs and grab your strap or strap-like something. So this could be an actual yoga strap. I don't have any of mine. They're all at the East End School. Or it could be a towel or a scarf or a tie. And you're just gonna wrap your hands up in whatever you have as a scarf until you're at about hips width distance. It's a little nicer to wrap, and then you don't have to grip so hard. And so now, with your block or something in between your thighs and the feet hips width distance, now we're squeezing in with the thighs and trying to pop that block forward. So there's a little bit of an external rotation of the legs, just a little bit. But then we make sure that we're really pressing down through the big toes. So again, we're just using that block to feel a sense of activation in the legs. And then we're gonna stretch the arms out long, and now instead of pushing in, we're pulling apart. And then we're gonna start to lift the arms up overhead. And again, just feel how the energy has shifted here. The arms are still activated, but it's a bit of a different activation, using different muscles as we pull apart. Right, when we're pulling apart, there's more of a sense of widening in the shoulders, in the arms. So for me, as you can see, it's a little easier for me with the pulling action to get my hands a little higher. And so this is a really good way to work the arm muscles, this pushing and pulling without bearing weight on the hands, back to that idea that maybe your wrists bother you. Keep your ribs pulling in. We don't want the ribs to flare out. Keep the belly strong. Keep that bit of pressure inwards with the legs, down with the big toes. Good, and then go ahead and relax the arms. You could take that block and just set it down on the ground. And then we'll just go through some options of where you can put that in. So if you are someone who wants more strength in the arms, you can be doing these arm options in any of our poses. So we'll start with our chair pose. Hands are still wrapped in the strap. As you inhale, pull the arms apart and lift. As you exhale, sit the hips back in space. Now imagine that block was still there. Good, feel that activation in the arms. Exhale, bring the hands to the heart. You can keep the strap there. Shift your weight into your left foot and step your right foot back. Oops. Good, coming to your warrior pose. And then inhale, reach the arms up and pull apart. Good, so now you could be doing this if you, again, like I said, if you're someone who wants to work on arm strength and we're in a normal class, you could just have your strap handy. And you could be using it anytime the arms are up or forward to get a little more strengthening action. Good, pull the feet together, lift the pelvis towards the heart, squeeze that right butt cheek. Exhale, hands to the heart. Keep the hands pressing together, squeeze the belly, twist to the left. Good, still got that strap, it's not getting in the way. Inhale, spin forward, lean forward. Exhale, step that right foot up. Inhale, arms up. Exhale, sit the hips back, find your your chair pose. Squeeze the belly up in it. And shift your weight over to your right foot. We'll keep the arms up this time. Exhale, step that left foot back. The whole foot can come down if that's comfortable. Pull the feet in towards one another, squeeze your belly up and in, keep pulling the arms apart. Exhale, hands to the heart. Roll your shoulders down your back. Twist to the right this time. Good, keep squeezing. If we wanted to open the arms here, for instance, you could just unwind the hands, keep that pressure on the scarf with the arms wide. You'll still be getting some extra strengthening action. Exhale, hands to the heart. Inhale, spin through center. Exhale, step forward. Inhale, Arms up, you can rewrap, or you could just keep the arms a little wider. Exhale, hands down to the hips. Good, now we'll bring the hands down behind the back. So if you're someone who has a hard time interlacing your hands behind you, or if when you interlace your hands, it causes your shoulders to roll forward, then you would be best served by always having a strap for this interlacing of the hands behind the back. Instead of interlacing, you hold the strap about shoulders width distance or whatever distance you need to start to feel like you can roll the shoulders backwards in space as you pull the hands apart. Good, put a soft little bend in the knees. Keep the shoulders rolling back, hinge at the hips, and lean towards the floor. Good, keep thinking about lifting the shoulder blades. Reach your hands up to the sky and then let the hands come as far away from the back body as feels comfortable. Make sure that you don't just drop the shoulders to the ground. Exhale, let the hands release. You can just release one hand from the strap and take any shape with the arms that feels nice. Good, big full inhale, big full exhale. Give yourself a little sway from side to side. Okay. Exhale to softly bend the knees. Inhale to firm the belly, flatten the back, sweep the arms up into the air. Exhale, hinge and reach for the floor. If you've got your strap in your hand still, you can keep it there. You can set it off to one side. Walk yourself out to your downward facing dog shape. Now another place for a block here, you could come down to hands and knees to set this up, or if you could take a one-arm downward dog, you can set it up with one arm, is you can bring a block underneath your forehead and just let your forehead rest on a block. And again, this might be a place where you can just allow your neck to relax a little bit more deeply than you might normally be able to. Big full inhales, big full exhales. Exhale, let's set the knees down on the ground. Good, so another option here with the blocks, if your wrists bother you, or with pillows or with stacks of blankets or books, is to bring the blocks, when we were doing poses on hands and knees, to bring the blocks under the forearms. And so what you're able to get here is the wrists are straight, but instead of the body being angled down at the ground, you're at roughly the same height you would be at if you were on the hands. Now, for instance, if we want to tuck the left toes and slide the left leg back in space, it's easy to keep that nice long line of the spine, lifting the chest away from the floor. And then maybe you try reaching that right arm out long overhead, or just touch the right fingers on the ground out in front of you. Keep that left wrist long and a little bit active. Fist with the hand or fingers long. Good, bring the elbow back to the block, knee down to the ground. Go ahead and open the knees a little wide. Let the head come down to the ground. You could even keep your forearms on the blocks here if it feels nice. Inhaling, back up onto the forearms. Knees come to hips with distance. Tuck the toes under and slide that right leg back in space. Good, squeeze your belly up and in. Good, keep that spine in its nice long standing shape. And then maybe the left arm stretches out long. Fingers hovering or fingers on the ground. Good, with the blocks here, again, we're saving the wrists from all that work while keeping the body in that nice straight line without kind of diving into the ground, which is what it would look like without the blocks. I'll just show you, right? Without the blocks, it's a little harder to get that nice long neutral shape. Good, bring the left elbow back to your block. Set that right knee down. And then take your downward dog. You could take it on the blocks or with hands on the ground as you like. Big full inhale, big full exhale. Good, exhale, tap the knees on the ground. Now we're gonna sit the hips back to the heels. Now this is another place, if you are really tight in the knees, this might be a really hard one to accomplish, But if you've got blocks, nice tall blocks, instead of having to sit all the way back, you can stick your two blocks right next to each other and then sit your butt down onto your blocks, and then you can start to be able to work that nice opening in the knees, right? And so for some people, this is gonna be already a really big stretch. Sure wish I had my hair tied with me. Good, rolling the shoulders down the back. Big full inhales, big full exhales. If it was too much for your ankles to be flat on the ground like this, a little washcloth is nice. I'm going to use my scarf here just to demonstrate. I didn't think to bring a washcloth. But if it's too much to have the ankles flat in any of these shapes, you could take a little washcloth and you stick it just under the ankle, just to prop the ankle up a little bit, so you don't have such an extreme extension on the front of the ankle. So that's another option. Good, hands come behind the back, interlacing, actually interlacing the fingers or using that strap. Good, roll the shoulders down and back. Just take another big deep breath here. Go ahead and release the hands. And now you can come all the way up onto the knees. So this is another good place. I always practice with a mat and then this kind of rubber gym flooring to give my knees lots of cushion, because my knees don't like to be on the hard ground. But if you are on the hard ground, I really recommend that you just always keep a little blanket or a little towel right under where your knees go, so that you've got lots of padding. Okay, so if you've got those blocks, so we do our camel pose sometimes in classes. You can take your blocks and stick them just inside your heels. And so there's a couple options for this pose. First option, simplest option, is just to bring the hands to press in front of the heart. Always lifting the pelvis towards the heart first, lengthening the buttocks towards the heels to open up the low back. Hands to the heart, just gently lift the chest up to the sky and roll the shoulders down the back. Good, now if it feels uncomfortable to let your head tip back, you just keep your chin tucked into your chest. If it feels okay to let the head tip back a little bit, you can. And then with the blocks, you might be able to lean back and catch the blocks with your hands and really feel the shoulder blades rolling back in space and the chest lifting up. What we want to do here is to really keep the stomach strong. We're using the blocks just as a little touch point. We don't want to pour all of our weight back into the blocks because we really want the belly to be working hard here. And then when we lower back to blocks in this pose, the other thing that we want is to move both arms at the same time. So we squeeze the belly, we bring both hands up. We squeeze the belly to bring both hands back. So we try not to go one hand at a time. It's an easy way just to kind of tweak the back muscles. Good, inhale, arms up. Exhale, hands to the heart. Inhale, tuck the toes, lift the hips, find your downward facing dog shape. Good, you can just give your hips a little sway side to side here. Good, nice big full inhale, big full exhale. You can go ahead and come down onto hands and knees. And then from here, we're gonna make our way over onto our back again. Just a couple more versions of supporting under the back. So we're gonna use some support in our, we'll just do it for our bridge pose. So you can have your blocks nearby, or if you've got a blanket or a stack of pillows, you'll just wanna kind of make them into a bit of a thick roll. So we're making a bit of a tall shape like a block. And then set it off to the side. And then you'll scoot yourself down onto your back, hugging the knees into the chest as you come down. Stretch the arms out nice and long. And then go ahead and settle the feet down to the floor. So many of us spend lots of time seated, and that shortens up these muscles in the fronts of the hips. And so we want to elongate those muscles however we can, without straining the body or overarching the low back, which is kind of a typical problem when we're trying to open up these fronts of the hip muscles. So our bridge pose is a great pose for that. If you want to watch, just remember that we never want to turn the head in the bridge pose. So you could follow along with my voice, or you could just pause and watch for a moment. You'll press into the feet, you'll lift the hips up into the air, rolling the shoulders under the back. And then I should have mentioned, you still have your strap handy. If you can't interlace your hands under your back, again, the strap is a great option here. Hands around the strap, pulling the strap apart. Now this pose, I think, feels really nice on the front of the hips. I can feel that opening, but it takes a lot of effort in the buttocks and the backs of the legs to hold this pose. So you can get the same benefit in a more relaxed version of the pose by bringing your blocks or a blanket or a couple pillows stacked up under the hips. Good. And the higher you can get it, the more stretch you'll get. The one thing that you want to be mindful of, though, is that you want to have both hips supported. So if I'm putting my block under my hips, it's long ways. I'll show you with it resting on my pelvis here. It's long ways across my body, or it's perpendicular to my spine, because I don't ever want to support my sacrum just in the middle like this. It's the way that your sacrum is built and kind of where the tendons are. It's just very, very stressful on that joint. So always long ways. And if you want to be up this high, on this really high height of your blocks, you've got to use two blocks next to each other. Yeah? So I'll just show you what that looks like. Good, and so you've got both sides of the hips supported. So like if you put your hands on your hip points, you'd have something mirroring where the hands are. Good, nice big full inhales, big full exhales. And then we can just hang out here for a little bit. From here, we can take some further options to open up the fronts of the hips even more by, let's first straighten the left leg. And then you want to make sure as you straighten the left leg, you don't feel any pinching in your low back. And if it feels a little pinchy in your low back, you'll just bring that foot back in and you'll slide the block a little closer to your heels, so a little bit more down into your butt. And then you'll try again, letting that leg straighten. Right, so we do this sometimes in the practice. Lay on the back, we have one leg straight, and then we draw the opposite leg up into the chest. So you could do that here, right knee could come up into the chest. So that's somewhere that you could put this in your own practice. Or when you're practicing along on a video. Good, and then we can set that right foot down, step the left foot in. Slide the right leg out, and then we just hang out for a moment, let the body settle into the shape. And then if it felt nice to draw one knee up into the chest, we could take that option again. And then because we're on the block here, what we create is this kind of bridge shape, right? Between the heel of the long leg and the shoulders essentially make a really long, shallow bridge shape. So we get a little more opening on the front of the body. Good, go ahead and set that left foot down on the ground. Step the right foot back up to the floor. I'm just going to pad up my block with my blanket because the block feels just a bit hard to me. And we never really want to feel uncomfortable in our practice. You always want to feel comfy and supported. So it's always good to adjust if you need to. And then with your blanket or your blocks or your pillows still under your hips, we'll just take a very gentle version of a shoulder stand here. So the idea of a shoulder stand partially is that we're inverting the body, getting the hips and the legs over the heart. So if we lift the hips up on something, even slightly, and then bring the knees into the chest, make sure you feel stable, and then stretch the legs up into the air, we just get a little bit more of that inversion energy. So without having to, go into a shoulder stand, which is a big pose, we can get, some more of those shoulder stand benefits just by propping the hips up a little bit. And again, if you were thinking about like, oh, how could I use props to, to do 10 minutes of yoga and really have it feel great every day, this is a really nice one. You could bring yourself right by the wall, prop up the hips a little bit, and then bring your butt right up to the wall and just let your legs rest on the wall, and that can be a really nice soothing option. You can let the legs fall a little bit closer to your body. Sometimes it's a little easier to accomplish with the hips propped up a little bit. And then when you're ready, you'll bring the soles of the feet down to the floor. You'll press into the feet, find that active bridge pose to remove your prop from under the hips, and then gently lower back down onto the ground. It's nice to take a little windshield wiper with the legs just to release any tension in the hips or the spine. Good, and then we'll just talk a little bit here about using some props to help us twist. So twisting, if you have any issues with your spine, can be really challenging, but we can really make it pretty sweet if we use some props. So we'll kind of come in from a bit of a more delicate manner than we sometimes do. So have your blanket or your bolster or your blocks nearby, and then roll over onto your left side. Okay, so from here, what you'll notice if you just relax is that that top hip, your right hip, is going to tend to fall in towards your armpit, and it's going to make this right side of the waist a little shorter. That's okay, but it's a bit more of a stressful position to twist the spine from. If we're going to twist the spine, it'd be a little bit nicer if both sides of the spine were evenly long. So we can help make that happen by taking a prop and sticking it in between, ideally, both the knees and the ankles. And so if you don't have a bolster, you can do it with a blanket or with a long towel. Or it takes a little bit more finesse, but you can do it with two blocks, sticking one block between the ankles and one block between the knees. And then that just starts to shift the position of the hip a little bit and put that spine in its more neutral position. We'll press into the right hand. We'll lift the left shoulder, and we'll see if we can put a little more length in the left side of the body. That right arm will reach up into the air, and we'll actively pull the right hip away. And then slowly, you're going to let that right arm try to come down to the ground behind you. Now that the legs are bound up with your blocks or your strap, you might not be able to get that right shoulder down to the ground quite as close as you would be used to, or maybe you never can. In which case, if you've still got more props left, you could lay something right behind you. I'll show you this backwards next time so you can see. So you could stick a blanket behind you or your bolster behind you, and then you could just have that there to catch your shoulder if your shoulder doesn't come all the way down to the ground, so that you're not just hanging in space. Yeah? Good, so we'll just hang out here, take a couple nice big deep breaths. Big full inhales, big full exhales. Good, and then if you're someone who feels like twists make you feel like a little delicate in your spine, it's always easier to come out of your twist by rolling your upper body and coming to the fetal position as opposed to rolling your lower body, since your lower body is just a lot heavier. So you could take the blocks out, and then you'll roll onto your back. And I'll show you this one from the other side so you can kind of get a sense. Just take a moment on your back, maybe give a little press into the feet, tug the hips towards the heels. And then you can take something and you can set it up so you can kind of scoot your back right up next to it. Get whatever you're going to stick in between your legs, and then you'll roll over to your right side. And then you'll line your spine up with whatever you've got right behind your back if you need that. You can put something in between the legs to help neutralize the spine a little bit, neutralize the pelvis. And then we're going to reach the left arm up into the air. And then that left arm will start to roll back in space. And then if you've got something back there, you don't have to kind of put so much torque on the spine like you're trying to get that left shoulder all the way down to the ground. You can catch the shoulder a little bit higher, right? You just bring the floor to meet the body wherever the body is. And then if it feels like it's too much torque on the shoulder, anytime the arm is extended and it feels like the hand doesn't want to go all the way down to the ground, you could always stick a block under your arm, above or below, below the elbow generally. Because if you're above the elbow, then you're really hanging on that elbow joint, and that's not so great. Good, and then settle into the breath. Big full inhales, big full exhales. Good, one more big deep breath. You'll unwind by coming back over onto your side, kicking your prop out from between the legs, rolling onto your back. And then from here, we're gonna get set up for our Shavasana shape. And so traditionally, right, with our Shavasana, it's legs out straight, arms by the sides. And so you could try that and see how that feels in your low back. For a lot of us, it's gonna be pinchy in the low back. And so then what you can do is you could take your bolster or your blankets or even 2 blocks. I'll show it to you with blocks since not everybody has bolsters, I think. And it's a little easier to make some fake blocks out of cardboard. So you could take those blocks and you could stick one under each thigh and you try and get them in roughly the same place. And then you maybe press into the heels, give your tailbone a little tug. And now with the legs a little bent, it just opens up the back a little bit. And then the other thing that can be really nice here is even if it's warm and you don't want to cover yourself with a blanket, this is particularly true for the kind of Kapha types, the Vata types, those like the people who are predominantly air elements, so like really in your head, a little maybe spaced out or super anxious all the time. It could be nice just to put a little weight on the body. So that could be a blanket or even a block just right over your belly or right over your pelvis. And then since we're kind of building our stuff at home, whatever you were using as your strap, if you want to have an eye pillow, if you have an eye pillow, cool beans, but you could even use your strap and just lay it over your eyes. And so just that little bit of weight can be really soothing to the muscles around the eyes. It also does a nice job if you're someone who has a hard time just closing your eyes and shutting off. Does a nice job of just blocking out the light, blocking out that visual input if you do happen to open your eyes. Good, and then we want to make sure the body's really comfortable, and then we just settle in and we relax. I think it's particularly important to mention with this new era of online classes where it's really easy to maybe get up and walk away before Shavasana is over so you can get back to your day, that it's really important, first from a physical point of view, just to let the body rest in a nice neutral shape before you go back to movement. Just allows all the muscles to even out, to reset. It allows the spine to relax. And it starts to mark that nice neutral shape in the body so that as you move through your day, you can continually be reminded to come into that neutral shape. Additionally, the mental and emotional energetic side is that it's really nice just to allow some time for any lingering attachments to the practice, any lingering thoughts about the practice, just allowing them to kind of pass out of the mind. kind of leaving the physical practice on the mat and then going back to your day with a clear head. Good, take 2 more big deep breaths. Start to gently wiggle the fingers and wiggle the toes. Maybe you rock the head side to side. Maybe you stretch the arms out nice and long. Hugging the knees up into the chest. If you have blocks or a bolster there and you can set your feet on the bolster, that can sometimes be a nice option instead of coming all the way up into the chest. And then resting on your back or choosing to roll to one side as you like. And then again, as you roll to one side, if it's more comfortable to have something in between the knees, you can always do that when you're resting on the side. Pressing up to your tall, comfortable seated position when you're ready. And then our last little kind of note about props here is that when we're sitting, we always really want the spine to be long. And so for many of us, that's very hard to accomplish when we're sitting on the floor because of the tightness in the hips or tightness in the knees. And so there's no shame in just sitting up on the edge of something. And when you sit on the edge of something, what you want to make sure of is that you don't want to support too much of the back of the leg, because we really want to just be supporting the very kind of back of the hips here, and then starting to let the legs fall to the ground so that we can start to open up in the hip creases here. And so even if you needed to be sitting really, really tall, you could kind of take a couple props and prop yourself way up. I didn't do a very good job of demonstrating that, but you get the idea, I think. And then you're sitting up high enough that the spine is long. If the knees were up, you could always support under the knees with some blocks if you needed, if you were up so high. Let the shoulders relax down the back. And bring the hands to press in front of the heart. Take a nice big breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. And then just gently bow your chin to your chest to seal your practice. Namaste. Thank you, ladies, so much for coming. It was so nice to have you. So I will go ahead and try and unmute you. I think you have to accept the unmuting now. It's a new privacy setting. And then yep. Oh, okay, great, you got it. I just wanted to give you a chance to ask any questions if you had any questions.
That was I just wanted to explain we were having technical difficulties with my computer. In fact, it isn't working. So that's why I didn't show up